Okay, so let me paint you a picture. Imagine you're going to college or university and you choose computer science or maybe IT, right? So you're starting and you have all these like expectations or oh, I'm going to become a game developer, I'm going to become a web developer, I'm going to become an Android developer or an iOS developer or blah, 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 right? So you get in there and you start learning about data structures, algorithms, and all this other stuff, right? And you're like, when do I do it? When do I actually like program? When do I like make stuff? Like where do I make sites like YouTube? Where do I make games like Minecraft and all this other stuff, right? So a couple of months go by, you finish your very first semester and you're like, I've learned some things, I can write, I can solve problems, I can do some stuff with like Java or C++, depending on where you study, but you still don't feel like you've actually made anything that matters. You still don't feel like you actually made something that's, at least to an extent, kind of like what you thought you were going to make, right? So here's the deal, right? What if I told you there was a programming language called HTML where you don't exactly program? It's not exactly, it is a coding language, but it's not programming, right? You're gonna get into programming later on using JavaScript, right? But for now, we're gonna be using HTML and CSS, right? So CSS are coding, but they're not programming. So keep that in mind. So in this video, you're gonna be learning about HTML and CSS, or I guess we're going to be learning about HTML and CSS using the Head First book. And on top of that, we're going to be actually making a site in the book. We're actually going to be able to make a site and we were able to design it and make it look the way we want. Now you don't have to actually make it look the way it looks in the Head First series books, right? So you can make it the way you want, design it the way you want, and give it your own touches, right? Also, on top of that, have you ever wanted to learn Photoshop? Everybody's heard about Photoshop. I feel like at this point, right? It's not like something that you have to be under a rock to not know about what Photoshop is, right? So, have you ever like were interested in learning Photoshop, but just didn't have an exact reason to learn it? Didn't know what Photoshop is, what it's for, what jobs use it? Then we will be covering Photoshop because I'm planning on learning front end development as well as back end development, right? So we will cover Photoshop a little bit as well. Also, I should point out that this isn't super related. I'm not going to be talking about too much in this video, but there are there are free courses for the Harvard University. You can sign up for them. They're free. You can even pay about I think $90 to get a certificate for them after you finish them, right? So that's we're not going to be talking about it too much, and I am actually learning them. I am actually learning the web development part of it, but the web development course. But it's just something I wanted to talk about. So the book starts off in the first season talking about web pages, servers, and browsers, right? Or the PCs or mobiles and other devices that people can connect to the server and then get to the web pages, right? So let's talk about all three of those things. In this section, you can see that it doesn't go super in depth. It just talks about like the very basics of servers. What a server is, which basically it's a computer that's connected to internet that has our web pages in it, our HTML web pages in it, right? And a web page is basically a set of code that we've written using HTML, CSS, or JavaScript, right? And then the browser, it's a browser. Right? There isn't much to say about it. A browser is a browser, right? So it talks about how these are connected to each other. It talks about how the browser tries to get information from the server, and then the server gets that information, finds the information that the browser wants, and it sends it to the browser, and then the browser shows it to the user, and so on, right? So nothing super complicated. It just talks about servers, browsers, and our web page, our HTML page. So as we go on, we see that the book uses an HTML page as an example, just a very basic HTML page to show you what an HTML page can look like, right? So now you might be saying, well, why is it showing me an HTML page when I don't know what all these means? I understand the text, the raw text, right? But you don't get, what does HTML, what does body, what does head, what does h1, what does all this stuff mean, right? So here's the thing. One of the ways to get people more interested in whatever information that they're about to learn, one of the ways to make people learn something in a smoother way. They're more interested in the content that they're about to understand and learn, right? Is to use this, is to do this technique. So they show you, a HTML page, a very basic one, to show you, give you a little snippet of what it's going to look like, right? So you're more intrigued by it, so you want to learn it more, so you're more, hungry for that information that the book is going to feed you, right? So that's the first thing I want to talk about. And also, I should mention that in HTML, the elements, those tags, they're not that complicated when you look at it. Everything pretty much does what you would think it does. So for example, I'll give you some examples. The tag Q, guess what it does? It does quotes. You can put it around a text that's supposed to be quoted, and instead of just technically writing the quotes yourself, technically typing the quotes yourself, just use the Q tag, or the Q element, I should say, to get quotes around it. Or for example, BR, all it does, it breaks the line. It moves you to the next line. P, all it does, it's for a paragraph. You're saying that the content that between these tags is a paragraph, right? So all these like tags are very self-explanatory. That they're not that complicated. So for example, you can see like H1. That's a heading. That's the first heading, right? And stuff like this. It's not that common. Head, body. It's very like self-explanatory. This book also has a there are no dumb questions section, which it basically just answers some of the questions that people might have, right? No matter how like simple they might seem. This is very good, and I think like, more books should do stuff like this. And I'm gonna tell you why, right? So, for example, let's say I'm reading a coding book, I'm a programming, and I just like it explains something well. I can tell like the person who wrote this knew what they were talking about, right? And it does a good job explaining it. But I just don't quite get. I still have like certain questions about different things, right? And they might be kind of stupid questions, right? They must seem like pretty stupid questions, right? But this book has this part where it just goes over some of the more common questions that people might have. I think this is very beneficial for the book, and I think more books should do stuff like this. So after that, we move on to the try to guess section, right? So here's what I want to talk about. Remember earlier I said that these tags, they're kind of self-explanatory. There's nothing that complicated about them. Here we're gonna see that, right? They've made this a guess section where you can just it shows you the code that you're supposed to guess what it does, and you can do this. It's not hard or anything. Just grab a paper or a pen or pencil, right? Or you could just type this. You don't necessarily have to write this on a paper. You can just type it. Like open just a text and just start typing. The book says what does this line of code do, and just write that, and then you move on to the next one and next one, and just try to guess all of them. You can probably get them all right in your first try. So one of the things that this book just does exceptionally well is it uses real life examples. It uses like practical web development examples. Like for example, there's this Starbucks. You have to write a web page for this Starbucks coffee, and you see I think it was the Starbucks CEO, right? And you see him and you're talking to him, and he says, I want you to make a web page for me. I want to have this, I want this page to be like this and stuff like that, right? And as you go on in the first season, you're gonna, add more to this web page and complete your Starbucks complete a Starbucks web page, right? So another thing I want to talk about is that it does something very interesting, that it has the CEO write the structure of the web page and what he wants to see in his page on a coffee mug. And I think if there was a point where it was written on a napkin or something like that, and I think that's like super interesting. So I think again, like it matters how the person who's understanding and learning all this stuff feels. I think that's very important. And yeah, I just think this is all fantastic. I think it matters. If you're just like um, super like how should I even explain this? Okay, there's a difference between when you're just like trying to learn something and you're barely going for it. Like you're not really into it, you're not enjoying it, and there's definitely there's a difference when you're just happy and you're super into it. It heavily increases the efficiency of your study time, is what I'm trying to say, right? So I think they've done a fantastic job with this in this book, right? That's definitely something that you should keep in mind. If you're someone who struggles to stay focused when you're reading a program, I think you should definitely try that first book. I want you to skip pages 11 up to 20 of the book, and I want you to do what I'm about to tell you, right? So here's the thing. HTML and CSS aren't like some of the other languages that you might have learned at university or at school and other places, right? So for example, if you've heard or written any code in say C++ or Java, or Python, you might know that those are compiled languages, right? But HTML and CSS aren't. They aren't compiled languages, right? So heck, they're not even programming. They're coding, but they still don't have to count as programming, right? So we're going to be using a Visual Studio Code here, right? Now there are multiple editors on the web that you can have access to, and a lot of them are free. But I think that Visual Studio Code is pretty much considered by many people to be the best editor for writing HTML code, right? So we're going to start Visual Studio Code right here, and we're going to wait for it to load. This is a project that I had opened before, right? So I wanted to close that. Right. So here's the thing. You might have said, well, how do I actually, make a HTML page, right? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to make a new folder, right? Say star buzz coffee web page, right? Go open that, right? And just make something like make a text document and say index, right? And then change this part to HTML, right? So let's see what this does. Yes. Right. So now we change it, and now it works like a web page. If you try to open it, actually opens up in Mozilla Firefox, right? So here we go. It doesn't have anything. It's just empty, right? So let's open this with Visual Studio Code. And I want to show you what's so amazing about Visual Studio Code and why you should definitely be using this instead of other editors like Notepad++, right? So let's just write some code, right? Let's do this. Okay, so here's what just happened, right? All I did was right. Let's undo this whole. Okay, all I did was just type this, and then I get access to these two, right? Let's see what this one does. It just says document HTML. So okay, so you don't know what this means. Basically, what we're doing here. Let me do it again. Basically, what we're doing here is that we're saying what we're doing here, right? This doc type says that we're doing HTML. We're using HTML5 in this web page, right? We're declaring the kind of coding language that we're using, right? So if we're using different versions of HTML, we still had to actually say it right here. What we're using. But for HTML5, we can just say HTML right here. It says doc type, then a space and HTML, right? So after that, we start, it says HTML, it says lang English. You can change this to whatever you want, obviously. Like, it doesn't have to be English, but it's English right here. It's the default. You can just change it. And I would highly recommend, instead of instead of just writing HTML and then head, then body and all that, instead of doing it like it takes so much time, right? All I did was super simple. I just type this. Right, there you go. You see why Visual Studio Code is so good. This is just one of the examples, right? Another example that I want to use to explain why you should definitely be using this instead of any other editor or any other way of just writing code with HTML is, hold on, let me show this, right? So we have title right here, and okay, that's not good. So let's do this, right? We're in the body section, right? I'm gonna say H1 for the first heading, right? And as you see what happened, all I did was just type H1, and I get this, and I just click on it, and it just writes the whole element. I don't have to manually write it myself. Like if I were doing this in Notepad++, I would just hold on, I would just go H1 and then close it, and then it just automatically writes for me, right? But I couldn't do that in other editors, right? So this is one of another reason why you should do that. Also, another reason why you should be using Visual Studio Code is because it has so many fantastic extensions. I will be leaving a link in the description below where you can download a Visual Studio Code as well as a video showcasing some of the best extensions that I have installed in my Visual Studio Code right now, right? So for extensions, you just click on this and you just search them, just type them, search them, and you can just easily install them, right? So I will be leaving a link in the description for that, where you can look at some of the extensions that I'm using right now, and here the extensions and in general Visual Studio Code just makes writing HTML and CSS code so much easier. You should definitely have this installed, right? And the Starbucks Coffee webpage, you should definitely try to write the code for that in the Visual Studio Code, right? It will make the process so much easier. Um, yeah, I think that's about it for Visual Studio Code. Definitely install Visual Studio Code. Definitely use it. And this is just a fantastic editor. It's just amazing. Look at so much. Like I just wrote so much code with just typing one letter. Like look at all this. Right? You can change all this. Obviously, it doesn't have to be like this. You can. This says the. You don't have to worry about this stuff right here, over here right now. Like it's not important. Just leave these be. Right? If you want, you can just delete them if you don't want to see them. Right? This basically says the the type of character set that we're using. We're using a UTF-8, which is the normal character set that people. You can also change it to 16 or anything if you want. But you can just delete them if you don't want to see them. So if you just you're like, I don't understand what this means, so I just don't want to see them. You can just easily delete them right here, right? So there's that. You can change the language, or just delete all of it like this. And when I save, I'm gonna use Control S for saving, right? Or you can just so friends, you've made it to the end of the video. Before we finish, there's a couple of things that I wanted to talk about, right? So the first thing is that because of the COVID-19 pandemic that happened, the Harvard University actually has free courses for a lot of different subjects, but they have a course for web programming, right? The web development, and I will leave a link for that in the description where you can sign up for that and even pay a $90 fee to get a certificate at the end of it, right? So which can greatly help your web development career and programming career in general, right? So here's the thing. I want you to go look into that. I want you to get into that for yourself. Obviously, I'm trying to build a community here, right? And I want to support people as much as I can, but we simply don't have the time to be covering every single thing in every way possible, from every aspect, from every angle, right? So go ahead and look into that, see if that's something that you're interested in. And also on top of that, you definitely need to spend time learning Photoshop. Now I will be leaving a link in the description for a really good tutorial that I myself used to learn Photoshop, right? And I haven't actually completely finished the tutorial, but I'm like halfway through it, right? So go ahead and watch the tutorial and spend like about 30 minutes to 40 minutes or even 20 minutes at least every day on Photoshop. It's better to spend less time throughout a long period of time than just spending like one whole day on something, right? Because it's gonna make it much easier for you to remember and memorize everything about it. So go ahead and look into that. Try to learn Photoshop. I will be Photoshop is definitely Adobe Photoshop is definitely a program that you want to learn and use in your career. And I will be leaving all the links for this in the description below, so you don't have to worry about it. And I want to talk about why, one of the reasons I'm making this channel is to make a community, right? I want people to uh, come here, people who, aren't necessarily like too familiar with programming, people who are just starting out. I want to come here. I want to build a community where people can help each other out, and we can all get better and programming together. And the next one I want to talk about is that since you've made it to the end of the video, if you liked what you saw and you want to see more and you want to support me, you can simply do so by subscribing and liking the video. And make sure to turn on your notifications so you get notified when I'm uploading my videos every single day. And make sure to follow me on different social media platforms. And while we're at this, there's just one last thing I want to talk about is that in the next video, we'll be talking about CSS and how you can style your web page and make it look the way you want. So here's an example of what I was talking about. We have for example, the Starbucks coffee page written here, and we've styled and we've added color to it, we've added borders to it. You can even change the kind of border that you want here, and you change their length and a lot of other stuff. So look forward to that in the next video.